where we are GAA-wise in 2019, a few things obviously have happened over the weekend. The ticket increase and the rule changes, well, the three hand pass one certainly rejected. We might start with the ticket increase as well. It's never going to be popular, Michael. I suppose to sum up what was done in various quarters, the headline grabbing one has been the All-Ireland final. It's gone from €80 to €90. It's gone up by a tenner. And then a €5 increase for Hill 16 tickets. They're up to €45. Semi-final stand prices go up to €50, €35 for the terraces. And then league tickets going up as well. So Division 1, Division 2 football and Division 1A and 1B in the hurling will go up by €5 from €15 to €20. Those pre-purchased before match day will increase by €3. So €15 will be the cost now, up from €12. And under 16s still free. So it's the first price increase since 2011, argued the GAA. I know somebody has texted in and argued that the season ticket has increased plenty since then. For instance, in 2011, season ticket was €75. It's now €120. But just in terms of a one-off, attending a one-off match day, it's the first major increase since 2011. The argument is, Michael, that the money is going to go straight back into the clubs. So they'll get an extra 500,000 this year and then another 500,000 on top of that next year. And John Oren has also argued that the economy is strong at the moment and our games are popular. So initial thoughts on the price increase and how it's been received?
Well, a couple of things, and to start with your last point, I think there's been a general reaction to John Horan's comments that why the economy is strong and probably has always been strong in Dublin over the last few years. That's not replicated throughout the country. And you'd find it hard to find a more accurate barometer of how hard things are than GAA clubs, because all over the country, GAA clubs are amalgamating at underage level. They're pitching in to try and field a minor team. You're talking about, relatively large towns and so on and so forth. So I think that's a fairly flawed argument to say that, the rising tide is lifting all boats. That's the first thing. The other thing, though, is there is an element of be careful what you wish for, because as we all know, recurrent theme is how much resources, how demographics, finances, etc. are available to Dublin. So the GAA could legitimately say, look, here we are, we're trying to get more money to disperse it out to other counties, and people are complaining. So there's an element of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Personally, I would actually think that the league increases are more bruising for people, because I think if your county gets to an All-Ireland final, even if it's Dublin or Kilkenny or counties which have been getting to a lot of them, it's not really discretionary spend. You'll move heaven and earth to get there. It's a once-off. It's a special day, etc. I actually think putting up the fiver, on people who are trying to get to league matches, maybe bring the kids to see, their heroes up close in a more intimate setting than Croke Park, is probably more hurtful to people who are struggling to make ends meet.
Donnchadh, your thoughts on the ticket increase?
So Michael kind of touched on it there, but I just haven't heard a good reason for them yet. If the GAA came around and said, we need extra money to fund X, Y or Z, I think people might be able to get on board with it more. But that the economy is good and the market can tolerate these price increases, I don't think that really stacks up with people, because it's not meant to be about how much you can get out of people. It's the thing about ticket price increases versus other things the GAA do to generate income is that it hits the people who keep the thing going day to day. So the people who are going to league matches are also the people who are going to club championship matches. They're buying lotto tickets. They are fundraising for their local clubs. So they're already handing out to the GAA on one level several times over the course of a week or a month. And this is just hitting them in the same people in a different way.
And what about the GAA's argument that there's an extra €500,000 allocated now this year for clubs, and there'll be another 500,000 on top of that the following year? And if you look, Michael, I take your point about the economy is improving line being very clunky on John Horan's part. I was surprised he said it. Any politician who says it is routinely slapped down. I mean, it's like, first day in politics school is do not say the economy is improving, because you'll just be hit with the fact that it's not in huge swathes of the country. But that said, you made the argument that lots of clubs are struggling. So whatever about the clunkiness of his line, maybe the clubs do need money, and maybe it's a quick way to raise the 500 grand this year and then have $1 million going forward. Do we accept that?
see, there's a parallel argument there, a parallel point to be made. You know, there's easy poke at Croke Park, the suits in Croke Park, which is very unfair, you know, about Croke. But when you mention that the economy is doing well, you do run the risk of saying the economy is doing well where we are.
Yeah, no, it was a poor
Dublin,
line.
You know?
Yeah. No,
so I don't want to flog John Horan because of a line that he might be too delighted with letting slip out.
Yeah.
But the thing with the clubs is, and Donnchadh summed it up perfectly there, the people you will meet at National League games are the core support, the core number of people who turn up all year and who do the donkey work for the GAA. So that sense of being aggrieved is more than justified, because they are the people who are putting their money where their mouth is in all senses.
The GAA's annual review for 2017 showed turnover was 65 million?
Just over 65 million, yeah.
Okay. That was an increase of 5 million on 2016's result. So, Donnchadh, are we saying the GAA financially are in a really strong, excellent position? And to what extent do we know how they're using their money? Are they in a strong position, first of all?
Yeah, that was the 2017 figures I think you read out.
Yeah.
That was up 5 million on the previous year. Yeah. So now the thing about the GAA is it's always sort of asked to fund a bigger and brighter tomorrow, and how you go about doing that and feed all the mouths they're asked to feed. I suppose Michael would know more about this, but the overrun in Páirc Uí Chaoimh has to be a factor in the GAA's finances in the next over the next few years, to whatever extent it is. I don't believe there's any great agreement on how much that's going to cost. Navan is in line for a big overhaul. Walsh Park and Waterford. Newbridge is another one. So at Casement Park, there's been money poured into that already, and nothing has really happened. So it is. There are an awful lot of things that the GAA are expected to fund, and if they didn't fund them, they would be pilloried for it as well. But I just think there's better ways of doing it, because this is an organisation that about a year ago now voted overwhelmingly to ban any sort of revenue from any sort of bookmaking firm or gambling firm, and that was a decision taken on the basis of the well-being of its members, that basically we don't want to expose our members to any more of this than they already are. We're going to try and protect them a little bit now for whatever it's worth, because it's absolutely awash with, if you watch any sport at all now, it's awash with ads from gambling companies. But the organisation took a decision to separate itself from potentially huge revenue stream on the basis that it kind of wanted to look after its own for a minute, and then simultaneously takes this decision to increase ticket prices, which comes on the back of last summer's decision, which I was totally in favour of, but it condensed the championship window. There are more games that have to be more games played in a shorter period of time. September's gone, so that paycheck isn't relevant for people who are following their county team anymore, and so that in itself was a price hike of sorts, and it's very much put more pressure on the same people who are going to the game again. So like they got hit again.
Do the GAA prices as they stand, so €20 for a league match and free in for under 16s, completely free in, pre-purchased €15 in and still free for the children, and then €50 for a semi-final, €90 for an All-Ireland final, and then for rounds in the qualifiers €20 and €25 for round 4. Does that not still offer good value for money?
There still is value for money in terms of the season tickets, even though they have gone up every year, as one of the listeners pointed out. There still is value for money there, but
even one-off games like €25 for round 4, the league matches.
€25 for round 4 would suggest that you've probably been at a handful of provincial games already, and there's a good chance you're at a couple of league matches.
So what should they be? Like, so here's a question: what should the price of an All-Ireland final be? What should the price of a league game be?
Well, I suppose the issue. Well, certainly the issue for me is that I can't see, and there hasn't been an explanation for the price hikes yet.
I thought the explanation was about raising money for the clubs, though. That's what as I understand it, they were very clear about that. They said 500 grand for the clubs this year, and then we'll go up to $1 million the following year. I thought that was the key explanation.
I would say if you're turning over 65 million in a year, you can find $500,000 for the clubs if that's what you really want to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can find that. You can pull back on other things. So, and we were talking about it off air beforehand. If there's an extra tenner on 50,000 seated All-Ireland final tickets, there's your $500,000 straight away.
Okay. And if the GAA were to come out and say, look, it's to raise the money for the clubs, and also it's to put money towards Navan, and it's to put money towards Kildare and infrastructure, and I think John Horan yesterday talked about ventures further afield and trying to help the GAA community further afield as well. If they simply come out and said, well, it's going to all those kind of things, which we can assume it is it okay then?
And it absolutely is, but I suppose it's the lack of explanation that the vacuum has to be filled.
Okay. Michael, is it good value at the moment? What should these prices be?
I'd be inclined to disregard the All-Ireland final tickets because I just think that people lose all sense of rational economic thought, when they're faced with the prospect of their county being in an All-Ireland final. I'm sure Donnchadh will agree with me. We've all spent, as journalists, the Sunday morning of an All-Ireland final outside the Gresham trying to find a mythical man who spent $1,000 or $5,000 on a ticket, etc., just as at the extreme end. I actually think the National League, in fairness, is very good value because you do have that option. If your kids are with you want to show them Noel McGrath or Diarmuid Connolly or whoever you're having yourself up close, you can walk out onto the field, you can see these guys, they're quite close, it's a very intimate experience. But I'd agree with Donnchadh. I actually think if Croke Park would said, look lads, we're putting on an extra $5, there's a bit of a mess in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, we want to put some money into Walsh Park, we want to boost stuff in Cason Park in Navan. I think the reaction of the GAA grassroots will be far more positive, as opposed to being, described in terms of the market can take it. I think there's an almost inbuilt resistance in a lot of GAA people to being described as consumers or the market. And you've already lost, the goodwill if you describe them like that. Yeah,
there is a ferocious amount of goodwill towards the GAA. People want to be involved with it. They believe in it wholeheartedly. They know that, they believe that when they pay money to Turnstile, it's going to come back to the GAA in some shape or form. And so I do think if there was an explanation for it, like, the Rugby World Cup bid failed, that was going to help us upgrade our infrastructure to a level we haven't had before. We still want to do some of that, but now we can't. I think people will go, right, fair enough. I think they could find the $5, or at least they'd know what they were getting into.
Okay. In terms of where they've earned their money, say in 2017, that's 65 million, Michael. 52% I'm reading here is from gate receipts, 7% is from Sport Ireland, 29% commercial revenue, and 12% is other income, quote unquote. So you might, I know your book is a number of years old now, but I'm sure you're keeping a close eye on things. In what kind of position do you deem the GAA to be in? What percentage of their money is finding its way back to the clubs? What kind of nest egg do they have? Give us your assessment of where things are at the moment.
I think, as Donnchadh said, I think the GAA is in a very healthy position because, they wouldn't have a deal with Sky. Park your objections or your ideologies for a second, but, Sky wouldn't be in partnership with the GAA if they didn't find that, it was an excellent product and all that good stuff. But I think the most significant figure in that is how much comes from gate receipts. I remember speaking to Tom Ryan, who's now the Art Stewart of the GAA. Back then he was the head finance guy, and he made the point that it's a delicate balance because you must encourage people to come to the games, because if they fall out of the habit of coming to the games, it's a very hard habit to reawaken or reinstitute. So in that sense, that's always, I think, the bottom line for the GAA, because if you have a high number of people coming to the games, they're bringing the kids, there's an example there, they're out the following weekend, they're bringing the kids down to the local club, and so on and so forth, because the GAA trade very heavily on that immediacy, that they're guys you see walking around your neighbourhood and so on and so forth. To me, that's the important one, because if the GAA's attendances fall, and they softened considerably last year, particularly in the football championship, if that became an ongoing trend, that would be a serious concern for the GAA, because everything else spreads out from that in terms of, the attraction to broadcasters, obviously, who wants to be seeing, a half-full Central Stadium or Croke Park. It becomes I won't say a vicious cycle, but it does become a cycle feeding from one side of the financial equation to another.
Yeah. And in terms of the outlay then, where does the vast majority of their money go?
Well, the great figure they have always that 89 to 90% of the euro that's given at the turnstile goes back out. That goes to clubs, games development, the insurance fund, which people rarely talk about, for instance, but which is, held up as an example for all sports. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that a couple of other sports may be avail of its munificence. But the capital projects are the big ones and the eye-catching ones, because obviously, there's the overrun in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, there's the trouble in Cason Park, there was, the controversy we had over Newbridge and Nowhere. And that actually brings up something else in parallel, a point I think that that is kind of at the back of a lot of people's minds. You know, in the last 12 months, the GAA has had to roll back on some significant things. You mentioned the rules earlier this year, but Liam Miller game in Croke Park and Newbridge are nowhere. So I actually think something at the back of a lot of people's minds is that, you know, the GAA has backed down or, you know, reversed course on a few major issues. So people may be thinking, well, if we make enough noise about this, maybe they'll reverse course on this one as well.
Yeah, I just have the financial results, the pie chart that the GAA released to the media for the 2017, and the biggest percentage there in terms of where our funds are spent, as the title did, was payments to units. So it does, like, there's no doubt that it directly goes back in. Yeah. To the...
Right, I mean, I guess it's all part of a wider discussion as well. Like I think it was Daithí Regan on Twitter made a very fair point, I thought, when there was a quote on Twitter that he responded to John Horan's point about 500,000 going back to clubs. And, you know, one of the points Daithí made was, well, you refuse to tackle payments to coaches and managers. So how much of this money which goes back to clubs ends up in the pockets of coaches every week? And that's a galling thing for a lot of people in GAA, like amateur my ass was kind of the point. If you look at the bigger picture, and Michael has mentioned several hurdles for the new president and director general, Newbridge or nowhere was obviously a huge one. Ticket prices now, the rules being rejected. You could argue the Super 8s fell relatively flat. They inherited the Porky Queeve situation, the Liam Miller testimonial. They never got out ahead of that, really. The CPA situation lingers on. The fixtures situation lingers on. It's been a trying 8-9 months for Horan and Tom Ryan, hasn't it, Donnchadh?
It has, but I suppose if you're in the top end of an organisation like the GAA that has such a vast membership with a whole different range of interest, you know, you're always going to have things like that. Like some of them,
I guess more the point though is, if you know, your criticism over this ticket price situation is they haven't come out and communicated it well enough. I would argue with regard to Newbridge or nowhere, the Porky Queeve situation, the Liam Miller testimonial, the Super 8s, the football rules, that communication has also been an issue.
Well, just to, like, Newbridge the Newbridge one, for example, like, there was a precedent there. Like, Kildare had played home championship matches outside of Newbridge down the line. So I would imagine that when they were making the fixture, now they misread the mood music totally, but when they were making the fixture, they just went on precedent. So they didn't realise what they were getting into there.
But even, like, I think that gives them a free pass. Like, even we had Alan Milton on the show here, and he was making the argument that the initial plan that the Guards signed off on was deemed not up to scratch. You know, and like, it kind of just got lost in the ether, but it was actually a big accusation that the GAA were levelling at the local Guards. It struck me.
Was that the day of the derby as well in the Curragh, Mike?
Yeah, there was stuff going on, but there was, you know, a plan had been signed off on from a Newbridge point of view. The Kildare County Board had been in touch. The plan was signed off on, and then the GAA, in their own words, said, well, it wasn't good enough for us. So actually, if you follow that logic through, they're saying that people were being put in danger by, you know, the local Guards. And my point is not to reopen that can of worms here, or we'll be here all night. Communication maybe is an issue. If we're talking about Horan and Tom Ryan, and you're saying they've communicated the ticket price situation badly, you could argue there's a theme there of poor communication.
Well, I think if you talk to people around Croke Park and around the time of the Liam Miller thing, I think that they accepted that maybe they could have handled it a little bit better. Same with Newbridge or nowhere, because there was a couple of different voices at the time from people in and around Croke Park that spoke. Like, none of them at the same time are fatal. They might be, they're missteps, but, you know, Tom Ryan did an interview shortly before Christmas with the Daily Media, and I was there, and he says, like, one of the things that people sort of miss, he said, was that when we make decisions, you know, maybe, let's say, for example, the managers are against the new rules, but when they make a decision, they have to consider the entirety of the GAA. So they have to consider, well, inter-county managers mightn't like it, but how will it play at junior C level? You know, they have to think of the GAA as a whole rather than just from the very top end to play the two games at elite level. So, look, it's I would be slow to criticise it because it's a large organisation. The decision-making process in it via Congress and everything that entails is so clunky at times that the two guys at the top of the tree can't be held responsible for everything.
I accept that. They have inherited a fairly unwieldy beast in many ways. Michael, your thoughts on the Horan-Ryan combination thus far?
Something I would always come back to is the old expression in Hollywood that there's never more than half a dozen people who can keep the entire equation of making a movie in their heads. You know, kind of the artistic side, the economic side, the craft side, the casting, the script, etc. And I think there's a sense of that in the GAA. It's almost too big to get a good handle on. And I'd agree also with Donnchadh in the sense that there's probably too much democracy, in the sense that if you could kind of settle on a benevolent dictator, it would nearly be better. You'd have more decisions and quicker decisions. You know, it is a strength of the GAA, but it's also a weakness that, you know, everybody feels entitled and is entitled to their input. And sometimes I think, you know, if you've been to some of these meetings, you'd question the validity of democracy under certain circumstances.
Yeah, I've no doubt. Before, Donnchadh, I do want to ask you about the rule changes as well, which, the 3-hand pass one, which has been rejected. On the ticket price increase thing, do you think the GAA are looking down at another Newbridge or Nowhere back down kind of thing?
No, I don't think so.
There's not a smell of revolution.
No, there's not. I think, as I said, there's so much goodwill there towards the GAA in general, and I think people accept that the money will be used to fund whatever it will be used for. I think they accept when the money goes in there that it's going to the right place. I just think that if people had a better sense of it, I think they'd be more happy.
Okay.
In terms of where it was going.
On the rule change situation, Colm Keys did a really good piece yesterday in your paper about the hand pass rules. So the Central Council delegates on Saturday voted 25 to 23 against keeping the 3-hand pass rule. The GPA, 90% of their members were against it. Managers were widely against it as well. It was interesting. A column was just quoting some of the stats from Rob Carroll's study on it, which kind of showed that the new rule was doing what it intended to do. You know, the kick to hand pass ratio. So we had hand passes down to kicks. It was 3.5.
It was almost 1 for 1, wasn't it?
Huh?
It was almost 1 for 1.
Yeah, so it was 3.5 hand passes to 1 kick in last year's championship, and over these number of games, it was 1.3 hand pass to 1 kick. So it was almost 1 for 1 in all pre-season games. You know, Rob Carroll had looked at it. Now, Colm did make the point as well that it's difficult for a stat to capture the fact that there were times where players were being surrounded and on the 3rd hand pass, and they were trying to half kick over their head to get it away. They couldn't put a simple hand pass away. So that wasn't, so it may not have been the success that just that stat alone might suggest. I'm sure you saw some games. What did you make of it in action?
I actually only covered one. Right. It was the O'Byrne Cup final on Friday night. I don't think it was, I saw somebody saying on Twitter, I don't think it was the Armageddon that maybe some people were making it out to be. There were definitely occasions where the 3rd hand pass was on and the 20-yard kick pass back the field and we go again happened. Yeah. And equally there were times when a move came into a position and the man in possession was left with no option but to kick it forward. I just don't think the sample size is big enough, particularly at a time when teams are experimenting. Like, I spoke to various players and managers over the course of the last couple of months, and they've had conflicting stories as to how much emphasis they were putting in on it. Some of them weren't really dealing with. For example, I covered the Sean Cox game before Christmas between Meath and Dublin, and they didn't play the rules that day. Right. And both teams were heading. That was Dublin's shadow team and Meath's team, and both teams were heading into the O'Byrne Cup under the new rules, and they didn't play it that day, which suggested a reticence immediately. Yeah. It probably need a bigger sample size, but I also see the argument for saying the league is too important, because for at least half the counties and maybe slightly more, the league is their best chance of making anything out of their season. Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, Donnchadh put his finger out there, I think, when he talked about the sample size, and that's something that always amazed me, the reticence in the GAA to experiment with rules. I would advocate taking each of those 4 football provincial competitions, the pre-season competitions, the McGrath Cup, O'Byrne Cup, etc., and try a different rule in each of them. Play 13-a-side in Ulster, play the hand pass rule in Leinster, try something else in Munster and Connacht, and at least bring it through so you'll see how different rules impact. But like you look at something like the NBA, okay? If the spectacle is under pressure, if the spectacle is harmed by a team exploiting rules, happened with James Harden a couple of years ago, the rules are changed. And the rules are changed unilaterally. It's a professional league where they're told, look, these are the new rules and that's it. But just to tie in one point there that Donnchadh made, the league is hugely important because, it is a more equal competition. There is a chance, that you'll win something. But it's also very lucrative for counties. A lot of people miss out on that fact that, if Cork and Kerry play in the league, they'll get half the gate. Or if Dublin and Meath play in the league, they'll get half the gate. So there's an onus on you to do well in the league. And as Donnchadh said, counties don't want to experiment in the league. They want to play something that they know, that they're familiar with, and that they'll win, and that they'll get a run with.
Just a quick one on the rules show. I'd be slow to criticise the committee because I think everyone agreed that it's worth trying something. The one thing I did feel was missed was the back pass. I think there's a lot of the issue that football has at the minute sort of revolves around the kick out and how it's used and how it's usually played quite safe, and there's no contest for possession. If there was no back pass, it would encourage teams to push up, because all of a sudden if you're chipping out your cornerback, he has to be good enough on the ball to use it well. So when teams are encouraged to push up and they can't take the safe option of going back to the keeper, I think that automatically encourages more long kicking. It encourages players to be in more orthodox position, and you might get a better spectacle of a game. I think that's one glaringly obvious one that I would like to see trialled. Now maybe it would have its flaws, but I think it's one that's definitely worth a go.
Minus Mayo last year, we had a fairly dreary end to the championship semi-finals and final were disappointing. Crowds weren't good. How much trouble, Donnchadh, do you think football is in?
There's a little bit between. I think John Horan confirmed the other day too that despite the extra All-Ireland quarter-finals in the Super 8, there was no lift in gate receipts at a central level. I think there was an element of that. Just Galway supporters in particular were hammered last year by both their teams doing really well. An element of people just not being that interested in it. It's probably not as bad as it's made out to be, because football was having a bad year while hurling was having an absolutely epic summer, and for some reason people always pit the two against each other, which is probably really pointless a lot of the time. I just think that I think that it has a bit of an issue at the moment, but I'm not sure if the knee-jerk reaction is required at the moment. If there is something, like you saw how difficult it was and how much resistance the experimental rules met this time around, I just think that if there is a change coming, it's going to have to be really well thought out the next one.
Yeah, it's not easy, and there's so many unintended consequences with these things. Loads of texts in, as you might imagine. All-Ireland final day, rip-off day, says Sean. Get a ticket for the Hogan stand. You could be sitting on the goal line or the centre field line. There should be 3 different prices. I think that's a great point. I mean, I am surprised.
With American sports, that's always the way, isn't it?
It is surprising there is just a flat fee of €90 and then the Hill 16 price, given the vast differences in your kind of position.
I went to the Meath Kerry All-Ireland semi-final, bought a ticket for it out of a van. It was the same 80 quid as you were sitting halfway I was in the upper Cusick, the very last row, and it shouldn't be the same price as halfway in the Hogan stand. No,
I don't think so at all. And by the way, on OTBM this morning, Dick Clerkin was on and certainly defended the GAA to the hilt and the ticket increases. Here's just a sense of what Dick Clerkin was saying this morning before we wrap up the conversation now.
This was very simply down to value. Like, at the end of the day, whether it's pro or amateur, the money in my pocket and the money of people going to watch games doesn't matter. We all earn it in the same places. We all get it from the same source. So it's then about how we spend our money. That was the basis of the conversation. So how then do we choose? How is it okay to choose to spend that money, multiples of it, to go and watch pro sports, but then we find a problem with it to watch a sport? Just because the players aren't paid doesn't mean that the value of the product isn't there. And people take offence when you call it a product, but that's what it is. It is down to basic economics. I want to give my money to something to be entertained. That's why a lot of us go to anything, a concert, the cinema, a football game. And that's a very simple comparison. To go and watch a Division 1 game, so I'll go to Croke Park, you're going to go into the qualifier games, you might only pay €20 and your kids will go free. That is an amazing value for me as a customer compared to other sports, regardless of people have been paid or not. And this defence that it's a pro sport is okay, we know where the money is going. We say it's okay then to charge £70-80 a week in the Premier League to line the pockets of agents and players who are paid ridiculous amounts of money. People actually saying that's okay just because that's the way it is. It absolutely isn't okay. So therefore, that argument doesn't really stand up when you bring it to its full extension.
Like there is sort of an acceptance though about the grotesque capitalism in professional sports, and I'm not saying that's fine, but I'm certainly not saying that it's fine to just project that value onto the GAA and to what is supposed to be the values of the Gaelic Athletic Association.
But it's not fine. Like, that's what I'm saying. But I don't think people accept it. There's no choice. Like, there's no choice. If you want to go and watch Liverpool or Man United, you now have no choice but to empty your pockets to bring your child. If you want to go and watch Ireland play the All Blacks or Ireland play England, you've no choice but to fork out huge sums of money, because that's just the market. That doesn't mean that it's right. That's just the model. The GAA haven't gone down that route, so there is no comparison. GAA are not looking to bleed their supporters for all the majority of the games. Then people started throwing in the All-Ireland. That's a totally separate discussion. You know, this business of a tenner in the All-Ireland, and it's going to cost me €80 or 90 euro to bring me 8 or 9 year old to an All-Ireland final. All due respect, an 8-year-old is no business in an All-Ireland final for €90. Okay, I never went to All-Ireland finals when I was an 8-year-old. You know, that's you know, that got pulled into it as well. I go back to the original point.
Well, hang on a second. So, sorry. Hang on. Just on that point, right? So you're saying you can bring your 2 kids to the league matches and go all year, and then say Monaghan go on a slalom and you run to an All-Ireland final, you won't be able to bring your kids?
If I want to bring them and pay 80, 90 euro, that's my decision, as it is for everyone. But that's the decision. In the same way as if I wanted to bring my child to watch Ireland play England in the Six Nations, that's what I have to pay. If I wanted to bring them across the water to watch Liverpool play Burnley, that's what I'd have to pay. That's my decision.
Yeah,
okay,
I get that. I get that.
So if you're accepting that logic for pro games, how do you not accept the same logic then for the GAA?
Yeah, I mean, the All-Ireland final one is very tricky. Even if they reduced... I know. So let's pick a number arbitrarily, €60. Would we all agree that's good value? If you're bringing 4 kids, if you're bringing kids, you're quickly. Sorry, Michael, can you hear me there? I was just saying, even if you do €60, you can get up to €300 very quickly if you're bringing kids. You know, so it is tricky. I mean, this boils down to, and so many of the issues we're talking about boil down to a simple point. The GAA holds itself to a higher standard, and everybody else holds the GAA to a higher standard as well. It's supposed to be about community. It has an amateur ethos. It's increasingly operating in a commercial way and dealing with absolutely massive sums of money, and the inter-county scene is completely out of control as well. That is where we are. That underpins, Michael, pretty much every problem, every scandal, GAA scandal we talk about every few months.
Yeah, I mean, you made it there, and that, you know, the GAA can't kind of take the virtue of dropping prices for an Ireland final replay by €10 and then complain when it gets a rap in the knuckles for putting them up. I mean, Dick referred to the market there, but that's only what the GAA president did, you know, himself. It's tricky because, you know, like as we said earlier, a lot of people within the GAA are uncomfortable with the idea that what they have is a product, that they're consumers of that product, and that money is needed to generate the training, the hurleys, the footballs, the infrastructure, and so on. But that's a fact of life that people have to, you know, accommodate in some way, shape or form. I think a lot of the time people are happy to ignore that. But then when the reality breaks through, you know, it's a touch of, you know, give me chastity, but just not yet. You know, I don't want to deal with the dirty details of commercial reality because I'm happy enough with what I'm doing.
Yeah, there is a bit of a disconnect there and a very uncomfortable partnership between the volunteer ethos of the GAA that sustains it and has built it to what it is, plus the arm of it based in Croke Park that has to make money. Yeah. And never the twain shall meet sometimes, you know. Yeah. Look, they have to clash just by their very nature. They have to clash.
Yeah. Okay. Not the last time we'll talk about this, I suspect. Donnchadh, Boyle, you can read in the Irish Independent. Michael Moynihan in the Irish Examiner. Thanks very much, Michael. Cheers.
Thanks, lad.
Donnchadh, thanks for coming in. We'll take a short break.
Thanks.
Off the ball on News Talk. Lunchtime Live.
Every Friday on Lunchtime Live, we go completely unscripted and give you full control for the full 2 hours.
One of our listeners, Sarah, is on the line now. What is on your mind? We have another listener on the line, Michael. You want to talk to me about rural transport. Rory, looks like you might be my last caller of the day. What do you want to talk about? It could be anything. I have no idea where we're going now.
No matter where you are or what the topic, it's your show. Get in touch and have your say by emailing lunchtimelive@newstalk.com.
Lunchtime Live.
And unscripted.
With Ciara Kelly.
Thanks to Video Doc.
This and every Friday from midday.
On News Talk.
For 40 years, Finline Furniture have been making